As entrepreneurs, we have to lead and inspire teams. I have a remarkable individual today who's joining us, who's been doing that for 20 years. And he's done it not only in his own entrepreneurial ventures, but he's done it helping his fellow entrepreneurs, you and I, one of the largest coaching organizations out there. And he's always struggled with whether he's a personal growth or a business growth. And he's going to share with you how you can have both and really accelerate your success. And one of the most important things, he's an accountability geek. So all of us know that we want to make a huge, that Steve Jobs dent in the universe. Well, today, I've got an individual who's going to show you exactly how to do it. I'm John Bowen. We're at AES Nation, all about accelerating your success. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Ordinary success? No way. You want amazing, remarkable, exceptional breakthroughs. Dig deep, think bold, drive hard, watch yourself soar beyond your dreams. AESNation.com.
Jonathan, I am so excited to have you here. It's, we've kind of crossed paths along the way before we turned on the recorder. We were talking about that, and you and I are both passionate about business, and you've been making a big difference. So thank you for joining me, and thank you for all the difference you've been making.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. It's a joy.
Yeah, Jonathan, one of the things I love doing is, I want to dive into the life lessons. I mean, when you've been leading teams as well as those teams then leading and helping coach top entrepreneurs, there's no question that you've got a lot of lessons learned. We got some really super takeaways for everybody here. But give me a little bit of background. Everybody always wants to know, real world, why should I listen to you? I mean, how did you get all this life experience?
Sure. Well, it didn't happen in law school. That was for sure.
Yeah.
But I started out as I went to law school because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life back in the early 90s. And then I embarked on this kind of weird business development journey where I was working in technology companies, and I had started a wind energy company at some point, and then I studied to be a yoga teacher, and then I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life, and kind of going back and forth. Worked for a wireless startup, worked for a shopping cart platform, an e-commerce company, and I was kind of doing the same thing everywhere I went, which was I was leading a team. Sometimes it was a small team, sometimes it was a large team or multiple teams in a department. And I was kind of doing that. And then the whole time over that 20 years, I would say kind of moonlighting and, spending my nights and weekends doing personal growth workshops and, trying to figure out who the heck I was and what I was doing on planet Earth. And I spent, I would say what I can bank on is I spent 20 years splitting those two worlds apart and trying to do business guy by day and personal growth guy by night until I finally realized the futility of that effort and decided to bring them both together.
No, that's great. And I mean, you've had a tremendous amount of experience, Jonathan, as you've done this. And, one of the things as entrepreneurs, all of us, business owners, struggle with these things. I mean, personal growth. I mean, everybody talks about balance. How do I grow a really successful business and have a good life? And, and unfortunately, so many people really struggle with that. And one of the things that you're known for is, how people should take down the wall between the two of those. I mean, tell me what that means.
Yeah, you bet. I think it's if you think about our culture overall, if you think about kind of the world of personal growth and then the world of coaching, consulting, leadership training, I would say that the world of personal growth is way out ahead of the game compared to where the business conversation has gone over the last 50 years. And I think the business conversation is catching up. You hear a lot of people talking about things in a new way. But the wall that we all learned, whether that was, in our first job and we were in high school, or, if you went to grad school and ended, or business school, whatever it was, or just started your own business, we internalized really deep messages around how you're supposed to be as a leader, how you're supposed to be as a manager, how you're supposed to talk to your employees, how you're supposed to, have consequences for things. And all of that conditioning, what I found in myself is that all of those things got in the way of me being myself And of course, world's worst advice, go be yourself, right? Like which version of me am I supposed to be? But I think the first order of business is to pull back the conditioning, all of the ways we've learned, down to the ways we've learned to talk, down to the baggage that we carry around what does it mean to be an authority relative to hold somebody else's paycheck in your hands. How many leaders think about the implications? What does that mean in our paycheck to paycheck economy, by and large? Not always the case for business owners. Sometimes it's way worse. But what is the reality of that? How does that impact your conversation with another person when you have the power to take away sushi dinner on Saturday night away?
Jonathan, let me just interrupt for a second, because I think I love this, and I think this is so important because, many of us who consider ourselves now entrepreneurs and business owners, we're kind of accidental CEOs. I mean, I did get I got them all kinds of, the economic undergraduate, the MBA, I got a master's in financial services and so on, but I never really wanted to be a CEO.
Right.
And it's just the business took off along the way. And I'll tell you, I personally struggled with this. I didn't know, I had some early success in my 20s. I didn't know whether I was, I'm supposed to be this hard ass, I'll use a technical term, a hard ass guy, whether I'm supposed to be collaborative, depending on what movie or book you read that day. And this is one of the challenges, and I think this is something as we evolved. I mean, I was a lot smarter in my 20s than I am now at 60, and we have life experiences along the way that makes us a little bit humble. But as entrepreneurs, how do we deal with this? Because this is hard.
Yeah, it's really hard, and I think to a couple things that you said really struck me in the sense that a lot of times when I talk with CEOs, I found myself in an accidental CEO role at eMyth in some ways, and what I found is true in just about every manager and CEO that I meet. When we really get down to it, if we can really kind of the tones get a little quieter and we have a real conversation, they say, Jonathan, I don't really want to manage people. I like my ideas. I want to make money. I want to have a success. I don't really want to manage. I don't know how to do it. And then that speaks to the other thing you said, which I found myself doing, is I found myself what I say flip-flopping between being too tough, being the hard ass, or being too nice. And the takeaway for me in this is when you do accountability well, that solves the flip-flop. So when you have a consistent standard for how you expect people to show up in relationship to their work, not the technical work, but how you expect them to show up, how you expect them to communicate, how you expect them to work with each other, how you expect them to name their mistakes, to embrace challenges, all those kinds of things. When you set that standard and then you learn, which you have to learn, I didn't know how to do this, nobody knows how to do this, is how do you slowly but surely turn the heat up on an underperforming employee and show them, hey, guess what? Here's what I see. Here's what I think you're missing. And can we get on the same page about that? And then here's what needs to change. And then holding them accountable for changing it. And that to me is it sounds simple in a way, but that's the lesson that I learned over the last really 5 to 7 years in particular, is how do you actually do that? That there's a method to doing accountability well. And that's what I work with my clients a lot on.
And I want to go to the past career just for a second, because you used to be CEO, you mentioned, of eMyth. And eMyth is certainly, if not the largest, it's touched probably more business owners than almost anyone out there, the combination of the book series and the coaching programs. So a lot of conversations going on. So, you and I are talking about our own challenges. I mean, boy, Jonathan, I mean, I'm just thinking, I remember coming up when it was in Northern California and just seeing all the phone calls and conversations going, and I'm going, I wouldn't want to talk to that many of people like me that going through these challenges. What were some of the, breaking down, I want to stay on the wall again, because, this personal and professional, it is a struggle, and how we want to show up to the world, to our team, to our families, and so on. And you said it right. I mean, I'm going to be me. Well, what version of me? Because but how, I'm thinking that scaled issue. That's a real challenge.
It is. I think it starts with, and this was Emeth is a great company, great brand, and I, relished my time when I was there. And, the decision to break off and do my own thing was really sourced in a desire to focus on one part of the conversation. And rather than focus on systems as a whole and the overall process of building a business, what really spoke to me, what drove me was this one conversation to be able to have, which I started doing, to have somebody come into my office, a new hire, and say, hey, here's the deal. Here's what it's going to be like to work for me. I'm really interested in excellent work, and you've got to be great at what you do. But it's more than that for me. What I want to create on my team, on my teams, is I want to create a place where people become better at being themselves. So before you say yes to this job offer, I want to talk about what that looks like, because to me, there's no difference between who you are is who you are. Now, is there different content at work? You bet. But what I've learned in my life is that when I get better at my relationship with my peers at work, I have more intimacy with my wife at home. When I get better at owning my mistakes with the people on my team, I get better at being part of my community and being a more, collaborative, productive member of society. And so there's no difference between those two things. And that's what this place is about for me. Do you want this place to be about that for you? Great, let's shake hands and let's work together. And then once we have that agreement, all kinds of things.
It's so powerful having that kind of conversation, because I always look at that. I'm in business not for more business. I'm in business to support a great quality of life, for myself, enlightened self-interest in my family, but also for my teammates, my strategic partners, my clients, and everyone around. And if we're all trying to be, somebody we're not, there's no doubt that it's not going to come together. But okay, so we build these now. We get the right people, the team. We're working together. We show up as who we are. We're having great conversations. This is where that challenge of being the accidental CEO. We're working collaboratively, but all of a sudden, sometimes things aren't working. And, how do we you call it rethink accountability. How do we make that work?
I think that there's a couple of steps in it. I think what I see leaders do is they go to one side. There's either two poles. I see leaders either blame it all on the team. I can't find good people. Or, which is actually more common I'm finding these days, they blame it on themselves. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's my fault. I know I'm not a good leader. All that. And to me, it's both. Accountability is both. Accountability is like, okay, how did I contribute to this scenario? And even if I didn't communicate it clearly, where were you? Why didn't you ask a question? Why didn't you raise a red flag and be like, hey, Jonathan, I'm not sure that I think there's a better way to do this. And that personal responsibility is both. It's not just the CEO's job. And I think our industry, and I was a part of that. I think we've done a disservice of putting it all on the CEO, and it's all on the leader and what they're doing wrong and what they're missing and how they need to grow. If it's collaborative, then it's collaborative, meaning everybody. And so accountability is how is each person on the team, no matter where you are on the org chart, how are you responsible for the culture change project?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
And this is, to me, this is so important, Jonathan, because I think I know in my earlier days, it was a team's fault. It was just clear, because I was real talented. I think, that you could see that ebb and flow where, we're much more collaborative, and, the CEO takes the sword if there's anything wrong. And it is the only way we can have true success in our business and our personal life, is everybody's got to be responsible for their part of the game. Mm-hmm. And, how do you do that though, Jonathan? Because, and maybe take both subjects. Having, the CEO be accountable, but also team members, holding them accountable in a way that's collaborative, that we're growing together, we're getting things done.
Yeah. I think you said the magic words a couple minutes ago, which is enlightened self-interest. And the key to all of this is when you're mentoring, the CEO is, or the business owner, what have you, that's a certain version of self-interest. That's the most obvious, right, in terms of the monetary gain, maybe notoriety, whatever the thing is.
I love to have my whole team working really hard to make a difference for the clients, but creating great wealth for them, but also for me too. How could you not like that?
Of course, absolutely. Here's the pivot that I think we're at. This is the cultural moment that I'm really excited about. Is how do you use your job? Let's say you're not the business owner, you're a senior VP or you're a frontline customer service rep, whatever it is. How do you use your job to get better at your life? How do you make your life bigger than your work so that even if you have a boss that maybe that's not somebody you want to work for the rest of your life, maybe you think, personality styles, we don't quite match. What can you learn from this person? How do you unlock your enlightened self-interest? So for example, around this one of these ideas that I work with all managers, I've never met somebody who this is not true about, is that anybody who's managing anywhere has an inner superhero. They're working too hard, they're picking up the slack for people, they're managing around problematic behavior instead of confronting it head on. That's the universal phenomenon. What if you didn't? How would your life get better if you didn't go through your day that way? If you weren't working so hard, if you weren't doing other people's work, and if you weren't, managing around all the problematic personalities, but instead confronting them
I want
head
to
on?
just stop and pause and have everyone, each of us individually think about that for a moment, because, hopefully you don't have anybody now, but almost all of us do. And this is something, Jonathan, that I think is so important because when you start working around someone, you're doing them a disservice and you're doing yourself a disservice and the rest of the team too. Because what I've found is when I call it releasing for new opportunities, when I I give them a chance, obviously, give them the feedback of what we're not missing, where we're missing, how it's not connecting, usually a 90-day process, but do it very professionally. But if, we're going to release them and I'll even help them find a new position where they'll be great at, with someone else. And because they're not aligned. What I find so often, most of the people leave during that 90-day period because they know they're not right for it. Yep. And they get a better position and we're able to have clarity and bring someone in. So, I mean, this is, the accountability, if they're not the right people on the bus, using Jim Collins' thing, deal with it, because otherwise quality of life goes downhill for not only for you, not only for your team, but for them too.
Yeah, and I think that's the key. We talk about like the 4 corners of impacts. Like if you pick any problematic behavior, and I would say like if you go home and you're complaining to your wife or your husband, boyfriend, girlfriend, or your friend, if you're complaining about somebody, that means you're managing around them. That means you're expending energy dealing with a problematic behavior. And I'm not cast in the stone, right? Like I did this, right? And so it's giving yourself like, oh wow, I'm spending a lot of mental real estate dealing with this person. How am I confront it differently? But if you think about, if you just take in your mental file and you go on your team, whether you have 1 person or 10, if somebody's not doing well, there's 4 kinds of impacts that they're having negatively. 1, they're having a negative impact on their teammates, right? Mm-hmm. 2, they're having a negative impact on the customer. 3, they're having a negative impact on you as their boss. And 4, they're having a negative impact on themselves. And they're not hard to find, but your job as a manager, we're changing that agreement to say, your job is to show people how the way they're showing up is having these 4 impacts. And when you do, the light bulb will go off. I promise you, 9 times out of 10, they will go, holy cow, I never saw how what I was doing was that I was having all these impacts. How do I change this? I want your help. And then 1 time out of 10, you'll have to let that person go because they don't want to change. They don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to look in the mirror. But 90% of the time in my experience, people will go, holy cow, thank you so much. I never saw it that way. I never saw how the way I was showing up at work that's exactly what my ex was telling me. And that's why my relationship ended or what have you.
Yeah, no, and that's how I see that over and over again, Jonathan, that, that happens and, getting and focusing in on, holding accountability. What are the issues? Making them transparent is just so powerful. But, you talked about superheroes, and many of us as CEO, business owners think of ourselves, I've pulled the cape up a bit here, as superheroes. And one of the things you talk about in your coaching is, being more Yoda versus Superman, more Yoda, less Superman. How does that help me as an entrepreneur? Yoda doesn't have the cape.
Yeah, it's true. And he doesn't have much of a self-image without being the superhero. As a superhero in recovery myself, I can relate. And I think that's it's sort of this it's this place that we get ourselves into a lot of trouble where without realizing it, which is that, as a business leader, however you got there, whether you got there by accident or whatever you bought a business, however you got in that position, you have a powerful will, right? You know how to get things done. You know how to work situations to get a certain kind of result. But at some point, that capacity becomes the thing that's holding you back, because it's really hard to be around somebody like that. That's one of the things that I learned about myself, was that strength to be able to move the ball forward. That's a great strength, but it also can be really hard to work for me if I'm not on top of that strength. Well, if I'm working for Jonathan, how do I find my own creative edge? How do I push my own boundaries? If he's always so, okay, guys, let's go. How do I find my own voice in the conversation? How do I find my own part in this brand? And that's what I think a lot of leaders, we do that without realizing that we're doing that, is that by that superhero mentality, well, there's a problem, I'll fix it. And the answer is, whoa, there's a problem. How are you going to fix that? Right? And asking them and inviting and evoking that enlightened self-interest. Why? And if it doesn't evoke their self-interest, well, then you have a person who doesn't belong on the bus. But being willing to take that step back in the moment, resist the impulse to throw the cape on, get in the phone booth and get out there and fix it, and just be like, I'm not going to fix this one. What are you guys going to do?
Well, and I think there's the reality that hits us as we get a little bit more experience on the business side, that if we put on that cape every single time, it's going to be wearing. And if, we're going to have a long career, we're going to be, maybe you're going to take this business and you're going to build it for the rest of your professional career, or maybe you're going to be a serial entrepreneur. Strapping on that cape for the next 20 years every single day, I think even Superman's going to be tired, and it doesn't serve well. And that's where, boy, I didn't do this early, but I did it a little bit later in business, that letting other people run with it, it actually turns out better.
Yeah, they're smarter than we are. And I would say, the one thing I want to say about that is people talk about training. I've got to do better training. And think about it this way. Every time you put on the cape without thinking about it, you're training your team. You're training them that, John's going to put on the cape, right? So I don't have to own it for myself. I don't have to take the risk, because thank goodness he's going to swoop in at the end of the day and save me. And so that's the training is already happening. I love, one of my business partner, Joseph, when people talk about systems and things like that, he's like, your business is already totally systematized. Your systems suck, but you already have a system for how many sales you get every month and the messages that you put out there. It's not about systems or no systems, or mentoring or no mentoring, or training or no training. It's what kind, and which are the ones that serve you, and which are the ones that are going to help you get to the life you want.
I think the thing I find over and over again is, it's kind of this whole concept of, when we're first time business owners, we're a little bit ignorant. So we look at it simple, and we end up, as we get going, we make it, so complicated. And then, as we really start doing, taking the actions that you're really sharing with us, they're so valuable, Jonathan, we go on the right side of complexity and make it simple again. And, business can be simple and elegant when we get the right team, they're involved, they're accountable, they're working collaboratively, they're advancing it. I mean, it can be just, I think of it as magical, but,
it is.
Where I'm going with this, though, I'm going, I've been at times where people talk about these kind of things, and I'm listening to it on a podcast or an internet thing, and I'm going, boy, there's so much change I got to do. And one of the things I love, Jonathan, is this concept of real change starts with small steps. How can we, for some of the entrepreneurs that are listening to this, I know there were times in my career where I would listen to this and I go, okay, this sounds great, it's nice, but I got to ship it today, or I got to do this today, or I'll put on the cape one more time. How do we really make real change happen?
The the thing, and this was, if there was one lesson that took me the longest to learn, was to break it down into small steps. It's like, it's no different than losing weight, right? It's like, oh, I want to lose 10 pounds. You don't lose 10 pounds in a day, right? You lose 10 pounds in having, in sharing the steak instead of eating the whole thing. And then, next week having, two steaks instead of five, or whatever your chosen, form of having too much is. And the same thing applies in the business context, which is, and to not make the mistake of like, don't go into the office after listening to this. Okay, everybody, we're going to change the culture. It's all about accountability now. That's going to fail, right? Don't talk about, it's like Fight Club, that famous movie. The first rule of Fight Club, don't talk about Fight Club. First rule of culture change, don't talk about culture change. Just start having different conversations with people. Just be the only one. Just, pull somebody aside and we have this tool we call the accountability dial, which is it's a 5-step process for starting an accountability conversation small and early, and then slowly working up to a more intense conversation. Just notice, hey, I noticed there was a couple of typos in that press release that went across. Did you notice that? Hey, I noticed you came in late a couple of days this week. Is there something going on? Hey, I noticed in that meeting, it felt like you had something that you wanted to say, but you kind of held back. I was wondering, what's going on there? That's how you start small, and you let people know you're watching, you're listening, you care. You don't have the answers. You don't need to know the answers. You just start asking the questions.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to this is so good, Jonathan. I'm going to go back to the very first part. You said that, you listen to this or you go to a workshop and you bring it back to the team and we're going to change. And I used to do that all the time.
Yeah.
And what happened was my team, if I went for a 2-day workshop or something like that, they would just know to hide for the week, because after 5 days, I wouldn't try to do it. And one of the two things, one, breaking it down to small pieces, exactly. And I got rid of the word change and focused on improving, because people want to improve. We all want to grow. I don't really want somebody to change me.
Yeah.
And that once I started doing that, they didn't hide quite as much, and we made a huge progress on a number of the businesses I had.
Yeah, one of the things that I write about in the book is that nobody wants change, right? We want the results of change, right? But change sucks. Change isn't fun. Looking at finding your blind spot and all that. And so, breaking it down and showing people how they can improve, and especially how they can improve professionally and personally at the same time. I think that's how you get buy-in. It's really, as you said before, it's a magical thing when you can tap into, not from a place of manipulation, not from a place of who moved my cheese, but from a place of like, what is this person about? What are their hopes and dreams? Who are they? Where do they? And it doesn't take nearly as much time as we think it does. And it doesn't take nearly as much time as all the managing around that we mostly do.
I always like the concept of leading versus managing, because, in today's world, so much of our team can be self-managed. And I have virtual businesses. If I turn the camera around on my global headquarters, my pool house, but I have a pretty sizable businesses. And my last business, I had 400 employees, and we're almost all in one location, and it's. I just find that in today's world, the world has changed, and if you can find the right people and really let them run, but you got to inspire them, you got to create that vision as you've done, all the action items. Now, one of the things you mentioned just it goes into the next segment, and that's the segment I always like to do is the book of the day. And I'm going to put up on the screen your website with good authority, and how to become the leader your team is waiting for. And I can just think of an awful lot of team members that are going, you should really download this book.
Yeah, buy this book for your boss.
Yeah, no, well, actually, I don't know how you can do it. You got to be careful how you do it, but they're definitely thinking that maybe that's what you should do. But tell us a little bit about what motivated you to write the book and what's in the book and how it would serve our fellow business owners.
You bet. The concept of good authority came from my own, some of the things we've talked about is seeing how in leading and managing my teams, how I was doing it this old way, right? How I was pushing myself and being that superhero and thinking that I knew the answer, and leading with, visions and brands and KPIs and all kinds of metrics and all, and realizing, hey, none of that stuff actually works in the end. That's all good information, but my team needed something else from me. They needed me to listen. They needed to have a new conversation about their own growth and where they wanted to go in their life. And I thought that I was in that conversation with them, and I wasn't. And so the book really comes out of some of my own experiences, and then a lot of my client experiences now at Refound, of how people are changing their relationship to being the authority. So rather than, it's not too tough, not the old school kind of autocrat, and not the new age, we're all on the same team, can't we all just get along? You're still the boss, right? You're still the owner or the manager of a team, whatever it is. How do you occupy that middle ground? And it's really about, it's a lot of personal stories and a lot of people looking at, how they were thinking about authority before, and how we tend to, a lot of the people who gravitate to my message and our brand, and probably yours as well, are people who want to have a real positive impact on the world. And I think we can get our feet stuck there thinking, well, I've got to do something big. I've got to have a huge impact in order to quote unquote change the world. And what I found, because I was one of those guys, what I found was that the way that I could change the world was by changing the lives of the people who worked for me. And that could be one person in a month. That could be one person, helping that person discover a new sense of their value, a new sense of themselves, a new way to communicate and name their emotions so they didn't have to act out. And it became the most rewarding work I've ever done. And so that's why I decided to make a business out of it and write a book so that other people could do the same.
And Jonathan, I commend you for it because it's such an important part, as we've talked about. Let me put it up on the screen again. This is, let me put it in the right, Good Authority, How to Become the Leader Your Team is Waiting For. And we'll have on the aesnation.com, the transcript. I mean, there's been so much value here. The link for the book, as well as, Jonathan, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how best do they reach out to you?
The best thing to do, you can send an email to hello@refound.com and just come to our website at refound.com. We've got a 3-video series kind of taking the next step on this conversation of how to rethink the accountability conversation. So it's just an email on the homepage, and you'll get those 3 videos in your inbox.
And I have watched all 3 of those videos, and they are very good. And these are so important things. I want to summarize this, in the last segment here on key takeaways. And there were 4 that we really focused on. Taking down the wall between personal and business, professional, and this is something we all struggle with, and we are who we are. Jonathan gave some great ideas. Again, go to transcript, get the book, watch the videos, because there is an opportunity for us, to the extent that we can be better leaders and inspire our team, work collaboratively, and really get out of their way. We can create that magic. So that's number 1. Number 2 is rethink accountability. It is not the, I was a pilot in the Navy. It's not the chain of command. It's not the authoritarian, but it's not, I'm in Silicon Valley, and sometimes it's a little fuzzy out here in Northern California, and actually you're up a little further north, and it's even fuzzier there.
Indeed.
But people want to be accountable. They want to have that sense of direction. So, provide that feedback loop and make sure they're right for your team. And if not, help them get that next opportunity. More Yoda, less Superman. Hopefully most of you have seen the Star Wars stuff along the way. I know billions of you have. So, but I think that's a great example. We're in business for a greater quality of life. We don't need to be Superman, Superwomen. What we do need to be is really thoughtful. And Yoda, no question about that. And then it's easy as entrepreneurs / business owners to get overwhelmed. And I really like, Jonathan, that taking small steps, breaking it down to small steps, not trying to be all things to everyone. Jonathan, this has been great. Again, everybody, you can go to the AES Nation above my head here.com, and it's got the show notes. It's got everything you need. The key is your clients, your future clients, and all your teammates, they're counting on you to be that good authority. Wish you the best of success.
Exceptional, remarkable breakthroughs. AESnation.com.